Howdy! Welcome to episode 27 of T-Shirts and Shawls. I'm Karen, and today is Thursday, May the 4th, 2017. Last week, I was gone all week up at Kansas City to go to PLY Away, so that is what a good chunk of this episode is going to be about. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. May the 4th be with you. So today I'm wearing my I Love Star Wars shirt since it is May the 4th. And my son is wearing a Star Wars shirt and my husband is wearing a Star Wars shirt. So we're definitely celebrating Star Wars Day. But really what I wanted to talk about today was PLY Away. And so I have my PLY Away shirt that I'm not actually wearing. So I'll just show it to you. So this was year 2 of PLY Away. And because it is the year of the rooster, that was kind of the theme that they went with. So here's the front of the shirt. Okay. And then the back of the shirt has a list of all the teachers. So what's really neat about PLY Away is it's all hosted by J.C. Boggs-Faulkner, who is the editor-in-chief of PLY Magazine, and then she also runs PLY Away. And she really makes a point to have teachers who are both really well-known teachers. So several of the teachers are names that if you are in the spinning world and even sometimes just in the fiber world, you may have heard of. So for instance, Beth Smith, Jillian Moreno, Abby Frankwilmont, so those type of people. And she also has newer teachers who maybe don't have as much name recognition as some of those other people. And I think it's really nice to be able to have that mix. Because I took a class from a newer teacher and it was a really fantastic class. So I'm glad that JC gives teachers a chance to teach at PLY Away. So it was a really, really fantastic lineup of teachers. Again, all their last names there. I had a really great time, and I will have a whole segment where I talk about PLY Away, so I will stop talking about it now so I can talk about it then. I feel like I've wrapped myself in a blanket for today's shawl. This is my finished Find Your Fade. So I finished it right before I left for PLY Away last week. And then I waited to block it until I came home. So I actually finished blocking it. It was dry yesterday. So this is a giant, giant shawl. So just kind of showing you stretched out. It is really huge. So it really is a good shawl if you need a little bit of a blanket around your shoulders. So it was a lot of fun to knit. Let me try to get from the beginning. It was a lot of fun to knit, and I got to use a lot of yarn that was in my stash. And I think in the first episode that I talked about Find Your Fade, I went through and named all the yarns that I used, and I've been listing them in the show notes, so I will continue to do that. But basically it started down here with this gray yarn, Robin J. Edmondson, yarn that I picked up when I was in Bloomington, Indiana. So it was a local dyer. And then I came to, actually, which side is the right side? I think this side is the right side. This is one that since it's garter stitch and lace, it's actually pretty reversible, although you can kind of tell just from the color shift. Okay, so this is the right side. A little bit about which side is technically right side versus wrong side. Okay, so the gray. And then I went into some leftover Madtosh that I had in the Steam Age colorway, and went into the pink, which is some Julie Spins that I had in my stash since 2009. So I'm glad I got to use that. And then moved into this variegated from Woolly Wonka. I picked that up from Anne when she was at Fiber Fest. I think it was 2015. I think it was 2015 that she was there, and I picked that up. And then it moves into this purple, which is another Julie Spins that I've had in my stash for a number of years. And this is a merino silk blend. So that was nice to work with. And then into this, again, variegated, which is MJ Yarns, which I picked up when I was in Estes Park. Actually, I think I picked up this particular skein when we drove through Boulder, and I stopped at a yarn shop there. And then finally, the dark purple is a plucky knitter that has been in my stash again since 2009 or 2010. Old school plucky knitter before the bases even had names. And all the way down to the end. So I have to admit, by a little bit before I added in the 7th color, I was ready to be done with this project. I started it February 26th, so it took almost a full 2 months to finish, which, I mean, if you're using 7 skeins of yarn and you're creating something ginormous, 2 months actually I think is probably pretty good. But yeah, it definitely was something that I was ready to get off the needles. So I'm really happy that it's done. It's probably going to be something that I use maybe when I'm reading, sitting in the chair and the air conditioner's kind of coming on me. Sometimes I get just a little bit of a chill, so I think it's a really good shawl for that. I'm not sure how often I'll actually wear it, going outside in Texas. We probably don't need it very often, but I think it's a good sitting around in the air conditioning type of project. So the other thing that I liked about it, since it is a lot of garter stitch, it gave me a lot of time to do reading while I was knitting on it. So I got a lot more read in these past 2 months than I might normally do. So that was really fun and a benefit of the project. I know people who have made more than one of these. I'll just say, I should never say never, because I have learned that saying never, sometimes I end up doing the thing anyway. But I don't plan on making a second one of these. I think it's fun to pick out the colors and to see that color shift happening. But that also seems to be something that is becoming more common. So there are more and more projects that are going on that use 3, 4, 5, 7 different yarns, so you can get to play around and mix and match. So perhaps if I get the hunger to do something like this again, I'll work on one of those projects just to do something a little bit different. But this was fun. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I got to use some of the yarn that has been in my stash for a number of years. And I am really happy that it is done. So I have a couple of new projects on my needles that I get to show you guys. The first one is a pair of socks, and this is finally socks that are not my yarn, so not sample socks, socks where I actually have to knit both of them and that I will get to wear. So this yarn is from Tumbleweed Yarn in the Dark Water Sunset colorway, and I will link that in the show notes. And I picked this one up, actually I think the same DFW Fiber Fest that I got the Woolly Wonka, so that would be 2015. So I finished one full sock. So there you go, you can see the colorway. It's a kind of a really dark charcoal, a dark blue, this pretty red, and then a gray color. So I think it's really, really pretty. My only disappointment is that because of when I was knitting this, which I'll tell you about in just a minute, I decided to do my typical gusset and heel flap and gusset, which left me with this stripe right there, which in some ways is good because it makes it so that red is not a super thick stripe, but not really sure how happy I am with that blue stripe there. I think this really means that on future self-striping socks, I should go with that afterthought heel. It worked out really well. It helps keep the striping. And yeah, even though I think this fits my foot a little bit better, I think I'm going to be happier doing that afterthought heel. So because this is a pair and I don't want to rip this out and knit from the heel again, I'll just do the second sock the same way, and then my next pair of self-striping socks, I will plan the afterthought heel. but I am in the second sock right now. So I would say about halfway through the leg, since I'm knitting this cuff down. Maybe a little over halfway through the leg at this point. So making good progress on those. The reason that I was able to make such good progress is because, especially for the first few days of PLY Away, I spent my time sitting at the registration desk. I think I mentioned before that I am the copy editor for PLY Magazine. So for PLY Away, I am actually staff. So here's my name tag. There we go. I am staff. So mostly what that meant is that I worked the registration desk, and I did a few other things, but really sat down, waited for people to come either check in, pick up their packets, or to come ask questions, and that meant a lot of knitting time. And I picked the socks because super easy to pick up and put down, and when I started, so I went up to PLY Away on Monday. The registration desk was open for a few hours Monday evening, and then I had most of Tuesday and Wednesday at the registration desk, and then a little bit on Thursday and Friday. So when I went up there, I was about halfway through this red stripe. So that means I knit almost the entire sock while sitting at the registration desk. I finished it on Friday evening. After the banquet, I had just a few more rounds on the toe to go, so I just sat down, finished it, and it was done. And then I started the second sock. So that was really good progress. We'll see how long the second sock takes. Then the other project that I started before leaving for PLY Away is the project for the second quarter knit along for this podcast. So the theme for that is any shawl that uses at least 2 or more colors of yarn, or uses 2 or more colors of yarn in different skeins, not just one skein of variegated. So different skeins, different colors. And I think I mentioned that I was planning on doing a pattern called Rice Fields. It is a brioche pattern, and it has been a long time since I've done brioche. And I'm glad that I'm giving it another chance, because I think my first time with brioche, I thought that it was very slow and I didn't really enjoy it. But for some reason, the second chance, I'm enjoying a lot better. So I'm glad that I tried it again. And I'm really liking how this turned out. So I think I showed you the yarns already. This is from Yarn Carnival. And so the high wire 3-ply, I think, is the base. So we've got the gray color, which is, I will have it in the show notes. I'm pretty sure that's Punk Rock Girl is what it was called. And then the pink, and so if you look with brioche, each side has a dominant color. So in this side, the pink is more dominant, and the pink is frippery, the colorway. And the nice thing about this pattern, if you notice, this is the first brioche section. So if you see the gray, and this is the second brioche section. I just finished the second brioche section. Say that fast. And the increases. So I'm going to start the third. And the color dominance, so if I flip it this way, the color dominance switches in each section. So here it was pink dominant, here it was gray dominant. So in this third section I'm about to start, the pink on this side will be dominant. So it kind of creates that not striping effect, but definitely plays with the color even more. So I really like that. And this is a fun pattern so far. I did have one little bobble mistake right here. If you can see the gray stitch that comes around the side, I must have just wrapped the gray yarn around the side whenever I was knitting it. I didn't catch it until I was about up to here. So it would have been pretty far to rip back. And with brioche, one thing about brioche is it's a little harder to fix mistakes. So I just decided to leave it. It's really not that big of a deal, and it's just a design element, and that is how it's going to stay. But anyway, so this is my entry for this quarter's knit along. I hope that you are participating in the knit along. There actually have been a couple of finished objects already, which is fantastic. We are into the second month of the quarter. It runs April, May, and June. So by the end of June, so you still have plenty of time to jump in with your shawl and join the knit along. Then I have one more project actively on the needles. And one of my goals this year is to knit more with my hand spun. I'm one of those spinners who does a lot of spinning and very little usage of the yarn I spin, mostly because I think of spinning as the activity and the yarn as the finished product, and it's done. And I realize that I don't want to do that anymore. I actually want to use my yarn for multiple reasons, mostly because now I'm building up a pretty big hand-spun stash. So what else am I going to do with it? And two, I think that it does help help me become a better spinner if I actually use my yarn and see the things that I like about it, the things I don't like about it, and that might change and affect the way that I spin future yarn. And this project that I'm working on right now is definitely, I am learning a lot from knitting this. So what I did is I took out my box of hand spun and I laid it all out. I actually took pictures of it all again. So everything that I still have, I updated my pictures on Ravelry and made sure that as many of the details as I could, I put in my Ravelry account, my stash. So that way I can refer back to it, how many yards do I have, what is the size of the yarn, is it fingering weight or worsted weight? And also just to look at it, because especially the stuff in the bottom of the box, I haven't looked at in a while. And then my son came into the room while I was doing it, so I asked him to pick out a yarn that he liked, and I decided that was the one that I was going to knit with first. And so he picked out this yarn that I spun. So you can kind of see it eventually does stripe. It creates really long stripes. So I guess you could call it self-striping. What I did is I took the braid and I spun it end to end. So that way the colors would have long color progressions. And then I did something called chain plying, which uses that one long single that I spin, and then I do what is in essence a 3-ply by creating it's chain plying, because you're almost creating like little chain links in the plying. It's kind of hard to describe without showing you actually what it does. So maybe some of you who are spinners know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so this fiber was dyed by Mickey of A Thing for String. So she is one of the local Dallas dyers. And I picked up this fiber when the Mafia Collective had a stop on the DFW yarn crawl a few years back. So I picked up this fiber. And I think I spun it shortly thereafter. It was very bright colors, and I was, looking for something that was bright and cheerful. And this was, when I was plying this was when I first got my woolly winder. I was using my Ashford Traveler at the time, and I had just gotten my woolly winder, and I was excited to use it for plying, especially for chain plying, because with chain plying you get into a rhythm, and when you do that, if you, on your spinning wheel, if you have to stop and move the yarn to the next hook, that kind of destroys that rhythm. Whereas with a woolly winder, the woolly winder has this kind of automatic arm that uses basically a gear to move the yarn guide, so it's filling up the bobbin evenly, so you don't have to stop and keep moving the yarn, which is really great when you're chain plying. So I was not really, it was the very first time that I used the woolly winder, so I wasn't really sure, how much twist it was putting in, and I ended up severely over twisting this yarn as I was plying it. In fact, I looked at my notes on my Ravelry page, and it says that I even took it back through the wheel to untwist it. That's, to just to basically, I went back through the wheel the opposite direction to remove some of the twist. And looking at it now, it is still really, really over twisted. I don't know how clear you can get, but it has a lot of twist in there. And there are some parts where I really just didn't get things even, and they're little almost corkscrews where one of the plies was so twisted itself. So I think the original single that I spun was also really twisted. So basically, this is a result of super over twisted yarn. And I have to admit, I mean, I believe this is merino. I have to double check my stash, but I'm pretty sure this is merino. It should be soft. It is not feeling super soft because it has way too much twist in it. But I decided to go ahead and knit with it anyway to see, just see how it turns out. And it looks really, really neat. So the pattern I picked is from Susan Ashcroft, who has several patterns for handspun yarn. And this is called the Long and Winding Row. It's a cowl, and basically it plays with the idea that when you're knitting in the round, you're technically knitting a spiral. So it kind of plays off of that idea. And so you can kind of see how the colors are forming a little bit of a spiral. And it works really, really nicely with this hand spun with the kind of striping of the colors. So I'm really happy with how it looks. And I have to admit, it feels over spun, over twisted. So it's not as soft as it could have been if I had not put quite as much twist in my yarn. So knitting with this is really helping me see that I need to back off on my twist. I really need to pay attention to what I'm doing when I'm plying, and definitely learning quite a bit from actually knitting this hand spun. So I know you can't feel that it's not super duper soft, but it looks really nice. And I'm hoping that once I block it and kind of soften it, maybe it'll be okay to wear. This might be one of those things that just ends up going on display rather than being something I wear. But the nice thing about that pattern is I can just knit until I run out of yarn. And that way I will get to use up all of the hand spun and not waste any of it. And I think that's about it for what I'm knitting. So as I mentioned, this is the second year of PLY Away. I did go last year and had a really great time. And I'm kind of an in-between person. Like I mentioned, I was staff, so I work the registration desk. But I do get to take classes and, and participate in the other things. Shop in the vendor hall. We'll be talking all about that in the next section. But I think what I want to talk about is the classes that I took. So working the registration desk is great. It's a lot of fun. I get to greet everybody as they come in. But I think it's more interesting to talk about the classes. So I took 3. The 3 I took were half-day classes. At PLY Away, they have half-day, 1-day, 2-day, and even a few 3-day classes. And it runs Wednesday through Saturday. So you can take quite a variety. Anyway, so I took 3 half-day classes. The one class that I was most excited about taking was one called Spinning Mindfulness, and the teacher was Maggie Cease, who is one of those who's a little newer to teaching, and she's really starting to try to build her spinning and mindfulness teaching. So if you are a guild or a fiber festival looking for a spinning teacher and you think spinning mindfulness sounds really interesting, I will put her name in the show notes, and you can look her up and see if maybe she could come teach for you, because she was really great. So we talked about mindfulness itself, what it means, kind of the meditation part of it. And in essence, mindfulness is being in the present moment. And anytime your mind wanders and thinks about other things, you bring it back to the present moment. So we were kind of taking that and applying it to our spinning. And so what she did, and I have handouts from the class so I can remember everything that we did, is she gave us 4 different fibers, one at a time, and then led us through 4 different mindfulness exercises. So we could actually put into practice some of the things that we had talked about and see what works for us and what maybe doesn't work as well for us. So the first one I'll show you. This is all 4 of the fibers. I took them off my bobbin and just basically put them all together. These I spun as if they were singles I was going to ply, so there's probably way more twist in here that is needed. I have not washed them. This is just off my bobbin and twisted up into this mini skein. But anyway, so you can see there was quite a variety. So the first fiber that she had us spin was some Polworth, which I had spun before, and is a really, really easy to spin type of fiber. And in that one, we were focusing on our body. So she led us through a mindfulness exercise that had us start at our feet and kind of work all the way up to our head. Focusing, I was using a mini spinner, the e-spinner, and several other people in the class were, but especially for those treadling. So starting with your feet and kind of what they're doing, going through the rest of your body, and then spending more time on the hands, since that is something that you are definitely using in spinning. So really looking at what the body was doing during spinning, and that was the focus that we were having. So that was the first one, and that one was okay for me. I felt that that it was something that seemed to work okay. But there were, later I found some of the other exercises to be a little more helpful for myself. So the second one, we spun a blend of merino and tencel. So the tencel gives it just a little bit of shine. And on that one, we were focusing on touch, sight, and sound. So the merino and tencel really helped with both the sight and the touch, because it definitely has a very different type of feel. So that one was really nice because I liked really being able to focus on the yarn itself. And in that one, we were also focused on color. So I can't remember now which color that one was. But we were really also looking at, as part of the site, we were looking at how the color was blending in as we were spinning it, how the fibers felt, and really keeping our focus on that. The third one we spun was some South Down. I have not spun South Down before, and I've got to say, I liked spinning South Down. It was fun. It was really bouncy. It had it seemed to really just be fun to spin. And so that is something that I think I need to get more of and spin some more of. And that one, we were focused on the spinning itself. So the texture of the fiber, actually drafting it out, watching the point where the fiber became yarn. And in there, we started practicing some different mantras. And so the one that actually worked for me was when I was drafting out, I would say fiber. And then as I was pulling back, because if you're not a spinner, this may not make sense, but I draft short forward most often. So that's what I was doing. So drafting out, I was seeing the fiber. And then when I pulled my fingers back and the twist entered and it became yarn, I would say yarn. So my mantra was basically fiber, yarn, fiber, yarn. And I think that, and also some of the other mantras she talked about didn't work as well for me, but one of the ones she mentioned was counting, and I do count quite a bit when I'm spinning, so that also really worked. But I think this exercise and the previous exercise, really focusing on what you're doing, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, how the fiber is becoming yarn, that seemed to work the best for me and get me in both the present moment as well as that state that I really think of when I think of spinning, because for me spinning really is a meditative type of thing, and I think that I need to maybe let myself do that more often instead of always listening to an audiobook and always watching TV or doing something else while I'm spinning. Just being in that moment, even if I just do it for 10 or 15 minutes and then turn on the audiobook. I think that's something that that I should do more often. Anyway, so that was 3. There was one more meditation, and that one was when we were spinning this really intriguing blend. And maybe you can see it. It's the green one here. Wool, so unspecified what kind of wool, linen, and silk. So like here, maybe, oops, I just pulled it out actually, a little bit of the linen. Maybe over here you can see some of these little things that are poking out. Yeah, there you go. So wool, linen, and silk, very intriguing blend. I have to admit, really didn't enjoy spinning it. The linen part, the flax, was kind of running away from the wool, and I would end up with a bunch of flax in my hand at the end. So the actual spinning of it was not great, but it was a good experience. I'm glad I got to try it. That was interesting. And the guided meditation, this part, I really didn't work for me. Other people in the class seemed to like it the best. So, you know, everyone is different. But this one, we were focused on the source of the fibers, which is why we had that blend. So we, you know, she was guiding us through, you know, viewing, imagining the sheep that are grazing on the hill. And then we turned to the flax that's growing there, and then the silkworms. And I have to admit, that's the one where my mind just started wandering a lot more than any of the other ones. And it was a lot harder to bring it back to the present moment, or the words that she was using to guide us. So that one, maybe it was just because it was the end and I was getting tired, but my mind definitely wandered a lot more in that one. So interesting experience. But that one didn't quite work for me. But like I said, the ones where I'm really focused on the act of spinning worked really, really well. So I'm going to keep that in mind and do that for next time. But I got a chance to talk to the teacher, Maggie Cease, you know, over the course of the next few days, and got to know a little bit more of her background. And she just is a super, super sweet, nice person. And I really enjoyed getting to know her. So the other two classes that I took were both taught by Jillian Moreno. I did want to kind of have more of a variety of teachers, so I didn't want to duplicate a teacher, but I really liked the two topics and they fit well in the schedule I wanted. So I went ahead and took two of Julian's class. I've never taken a class from her before, so that was a good experience, and both classes were fantastic. So the first one was a sheep sampler class, and not only were we sampling the wool, we were also sampling sheep cheese. So let me get out my handout so I can remember what we did there. So she had the little spread where there were different things to pair with the cheeses. And then she would bring out one cheese at a time and talk about it and tell us all about it. And one fiber at a time. So as we were spinning, we were also nibbling on the cheese. And so I'll talk about the cheeses and then I'll show you the fibers. So we had 4 cheeses, and one was a Greek cheese, so Minori. This one was a really soft cheese. And I have to admit, I didn't really, that one was the one that I liked the least. So I didn't really like that one that much. I also didn't pair it with a lot of stuff. I mean, any of the cheeses I didn't pair with a lot of stuff because there was stuff on the table that she had pairing that I didn't really like dates and a lot of nuts and dried cherries, and I just don't really like those things by themselves even. I probably should have just tried them with the cheese anyway, but I didn't. But anyway, so that one was my least favorite. And then the other 3 I did like pretty well. The second one is called Euphoria, and it's actually spelled E-U-E, and then Foria, from Holland. And I didn't write down, she gave us this little handout where, you know, we could write down the smell and the feel and the taste, and I didn't write down any notes. But I remember thinking it was a lot better than the first cheese. The third one was Manchego from Spain. And that one was pretty good, and I would say that one and the fourth one were probably my top 2. And then the last one was from Italy, and it was Pecorino Toscano. And this one seemed like it would be really good to use to grate over pasta instead of Parmesan. So most of the cheeses she actually found at Trader Joe's. So there is a Trader Joe's in Dallas. It's just a little bit of a drive from me. But I was in my grocery store, grocery shopping Tuesday, and I looked at the cheese section, and I saw one that was, and I didn't have my list with me, so I couldn't remember the names, but I saw a Pecorino Romano, and I couldn't remember. I knew the Pecorino was right, and it actually said on the label that it was a sheep cheese, so I knew I had that part right, and it was in the section that was recommended for grading, so I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and buy this. And it turns out Romano and Toscano are two completely different cheeses. I actually Googled I did, Pecorino Romano versus Toscano. And the sites that was reading actually said they are very different cheeses. And indeed, when I graded the Toscano over my spaghetti last night, it was a very strong cheese. So I definitely don't need to put as much on it. And I'd already pulled back from what I normally put on for Parmesan. But I definitely will put less of that. But it was still pretty good. But I think I need to find Pecorino Toscano because I really did like that one. So that was fun in the class. There was a mother-daughter pair in the class, and they had actually gone down to the little market that was in the hotel and bought some wine and brought it up for the class. So we also got to have some wine with our cheese. And then we got to spin mostly fine fibers because that was one of the themes for PLY Away. So the first one that we spun was merino, and which I have spun before. But anyway, so we spun merino. I'm not just 100% merino. I love knitting with it, but I don't always enjoy spinning with it. But anyway, so this is a little plyback sample. I actually have like here's my little mini skein of everything that I spun during that class. But this was the merino. The next thing that we spun was targhee. Which one was that? The purple. And I've spun targhee before, but it's been a while, and I've actually got some targhee in my stash to spin, and I've been meaning to spin it, and this experience made me realize more than ever, yes, you need to get that targhee out of your stash and spin it. I loved spinning the targhee. It has, can you just tell how it's got that bounce already? Just really elastic. I think that means it would probably make really great socks since it's got that bit of elasticness in it. So I really enjoyed spinning the targhee. That was a lot of fun. And I had to kind of stop myself from spinning the targhee during the class because I wanted to try the other fibers. Then we got to spin Polworth. So here's a little sample of the Polworth. And again, I have spun Polworth before. And then she gave us a blend of Polworth and silk. So I think that one, yeah, the orange one, that's this one. And it was 80% Polworth and 20% silk. So there's not a lot of silk content in here. But she actually gave a recommendation to take a braid of Polworth, 100% Polworth, and one of the blend, the Polworth and silk. And then spin singles out of those two braids and then ply the two together. And that gives just that tiny little, just one ply of silk just adds that tiny little of depth, dimension, shine to the yarn without, not overpowering is not quite the right word. But she recommended trying that. And I did actually have a little sample that I did of the Polworth and the Polworth silk, but I think that's something that you need to try a bigger sample rather than the little plyback. So those were our 4 fine fibers. And then she picked out a fiber from a sheep that is mostly used not for its wool. This was Frisian. So for you, it just looks like this white string. But Frisian was definitely not, especially compared to the finer fibers, not very soft. This is not something that you really want to wear close to your skin. And yet it was pretty fun to spin. I'm glad that I got a chance to spin it. And I do still have, we get generous samples of the fiber, so I do still have some left that I can spin. And I'll probably try spinning some more and knitting with it to kind of see how that turns out. So that was that class. And then the next day I took kaleidoscope yarns. And this one was using a singles yarn and playing with color. So a singles yarn basically means that you spin it just one time and you do not ply. So you kind of have to spin with a different mindset. You don't add as much twist as you would when you're planning to ply something. And there are other kind of things to keep in consideration when you're spinning just a single that you're not going to ply. And I'll be honest, I had never done that before. I've always plied the yarn that I spin. So I picked the class because I thought if I'm going to try doing some singles, I think it would be fun to also be playing with color at the same time. So indeed, it was a very fun class. I quite enjoyed it. I think the fibers were mostly merino and BFL, if I remember right. Actually, there they are. BFL and Corriedale, actually. Okay, so BFL and Corriedale were our fibers that we were spinning with. But basically, she gave us a couple of different ways of playing with color. The first thing we did was actually a little primer on spinning singles. So we had to practice, spinning a single, not too much twist. And so I got some practice on that. And it actually turned out to be not as difficult as I thought it might be. And then we got to play with color. So one of the things that we really played with was taking fibers. So let's just say, take the ends of fibers. So take the orange and the blue and hold them together and draft them into the wheel together. So that you're creating that blend of colors while you're drafting and not while you're plying. So that gives you kind of this marled yarn. And I probably should have put something much darker behind this. Maybe over here on the blue background. So anyway, it has, I used a natural fiber and an orange, and I held them together while I was spinning. So this is not plied. It looks like it might be plied together, but it's not. It is a single yarn. So I did that with a lot of different, so I'll just show you the whole thing, a lot of different color combinations, trying out the, blending them at the wheel. Then she said, okay, so you've done 2, why don't you try 3? And this is totally not going to show up at all, but I used a natural color, a light blue, and a darker pink. And I had 3 of them going together. And I have to say, I think that was my favorite technique to use during the class, holding and blending 3 different colors at one time into your single. And then she also, we talked about doing longer runs of a color and kind of creating a gradient, or you can create a self-striping yarn by doing shorter runs of color one after the other. And there were other types of things that we talked about in doing the singles. But I went ahead and took this off my bobbin, washed it, so I did the finishing on it, and I hung it to dry, so it actually just was dry this morning. And I do plan on actually knitting a little swatch out of this just to see how it turns out. That was one thing that Jillian did, is she had created samples of all the different techniques she told us about, and then she knitted swatches from the samples so we could see how it would actually turn out into a finished project. And so I plan to do that. And I should probably show you guys how it turned out. So on a future podcast episode, I'll show you the results of my knitted swatch of my singles yarns. I probably will not knit swatches out of the other stuff that I spun because, like I said, those I really did put too much twist in. They would need to be plied, and if I plied it, I would end up with very, very little yarn. But yeah, the classes were a lot of fun. I enjoyed getting to see all the different wheels that everyone brings, and kind of all the different experiences everyone has. So lots and lots of fun with the classes. And then the other big thing that I did was shop, which I will tell you about. But before we go into shopping, the other big kind of things that happened is there was a fashion show which was really fun for people to show off things that they had made, mostly out of hand spun. Some gorgeous, gorgeous shawls, some sweaters that were really fantastic, and other things. So that was fun. And then on the Friday night, we had a banquet, and there was a talk that was given at the banquet. Linda Courtwright from Wild Fibers magazine gave the talk, but really I think my favorite part of the banquet was the pre-show. JC had found a local performer who does things like juggling and riding a unicycle, and was very, very funny, and he was also really cute. So she had invited him to perform. It had nothing to do with spinning. She just thought we would enjoy it. She was right. I think it was a really, really fantastic, a fun show, a good way to kick off the banquet, and I really enjoyed watching him perform. So it wasn't all about spinning, but it was definitely a good time. But I think I will grab the stuff that I bought in the vendor hall and show you guys what I stashed. The vendor hall was really, really great. JC had done an amazing job picking out a good variety of vendors. The vendor hall was broken into 2 different rooms, mostly just because of a space situation. So we had kind of the big room where most of the vendors were, and then a smaller room where there was a silent auction, a demo space, and 4 other vendors. And I actually really liked that room because it felt a lot less overwhelming. It felt like you could actually spend a little more time there, that you weren't distracted by, oh my gosh, what's that over there and what's that over there? And I think actually the vendors who were in that room did enjoy that because people did spend more time. I think the initial concern was that people would forget to go in the smaller room, and hopefully that did not happen. But I think it was actually kind of a nice experience, and I almost wonder what it would be like to have a vendor hall that was divided into several different smaller rooms. So that way, as you go into each room, you just have 4 or 5 vendors, and you can concentrate on those. And then when you're done in that room, you can go to the next room and look at those 4 or 5 vendors without just being, overwhelmed by bunches of vendors. No idea if that would work out well or not, but it's something to possibly consider. So there were a few vendors that I knew for sure I wanted to see, either ones that had been there last year, or a few that actually were at DFW Fiber Fest that I knew I wanted to actually spend some time looking at. Since I wasn't a vendor myself, I actually had more time. So I did buy a little bit of fiber, a little bit of yarn, and then some other equipment. So I think that's kind of how I'll do it. I'll do the yarn, the fiber, and then the other stuff. So the yarn, I bought 2 skeins of yarn, both from Yarn Geek. So Yarn Geek Fibers. This is first skein, so let me show you. So Yarn Geek Fibers. And this is, I told you I really am enjoying Targhee lately, a DK weight, 80% Targhee and 20% silk. Just, can you see the bounce? I'm just, giving a little tug on the skein. This is just, I think this is going to make something that has really great stitch definition that will give me a lot of good stretch. Since it's DK weight, I probably would not do socks out of it. Maybe a hat. It is 230 yards. So it would be a good hat, maybe some fingerless mitts. But I definitely want to do something that I can play with the stitch definition on this one and a little bit of that elasticity in there. So I really like that. This colorway is Shirley Winifred Jeffries. So that's nice. By the way, the person whose name I cannot remember right now, who does Yarn Geek, is super, super nice. I enjoyed talking with her. The other one that I got is this gradient. So This was posted as a one of a kind, and I really like the colors, and so I decided to pick it up. But the other reason that I thought I really wanted to try this is because it is 75% Coriadale wool and 25% nylon. So I have spun Coriadale before, but I haven't actually had a yarn made out of Coriadale. So I really like that and decided to pick that up. Because it has that nylon content in it, I do think that this would be really great for socks. The gradient means that, you know, my two socks are not going to match unless I figure something out. And I kind of like that idea. Having socks that, you know, kind of starts at the cuff and goes down to the toe, and then the gradient starts up again at the cuff of the next sock. I think that might be kind of interesting. So right now I'm playing with that idea of turning this into socks that don't exactly match, but go together. So I think that might be fun. So that was the yarn that I bought, and then I bought a little bit of fiber. So actually, there's one down on the floor too. Bought a little more fiber than I thought just a second ago. So one of the vendors that I really liked last year is Abstract Fiber. And one of the things that I liked is that there were fiber content that was a little bit different, very luxurious. So I did get one luxury blend, which I'll show you in just a minute. But the one I picked up here, can you guess what fiber it is? I've already mentioned it. It's some Targhee. So I got this Rainforest colorway. So lots of nice blues and greens, some super wonderful Targhee that I plan to spin up at some point. I have no idea when it'll actually go onto the wheel, and no idea what project I will make out of it, but I was really happy to get this super squishy Targhee. And then last year at Abstract Fiber, the luxury blend that I got was a camel and silk blend. And I still haven't spun it. It's still in my stash. But this time I decided to go for yak and silk. And if you can tell, there's some darker kind of threads running through this. That is the yak. Yak is usually a darker color. And the silk is what gives it that extra shine. But this is, I wish you guys could feel this. This is so soft. And I imagine spinning it might actually be a challenge because it is so soft. But I think it will be fun to see what it becomes. This is something where I want to make sure when I do spin it that I don't add a lot of twist, because like I saw in the merino, too much twist can make something that is soft something not soft. So I don't want to ruin the softness of this. But it also just feels fantastic. No idea when I'll get around to actually spinning that, but I'm happy I picked that up. Then I have something on the floor. Okay, so I have bought from October House before. I really like October House because her colors are softer, I guess, and so I just like the overall look of her booth. So here's the fiber I bought. And normally I don't go for yellows and oranges, but since the purples are added in here, I really liked that combination. The colorway is Venetian, and this is a blend of merino and silk, so 80% merino and 20% tussa silk. And there's her card, October House Fiber Arts. She was at DFW Fiber Fest, but since she was on completely the opposite side of the hall from me, I really didn't get a chance to go over there at during DFW, which I knew she was going to be at PLY Away, so I was okay with, because then I got to actually see her at PLY Away. And if I remember right, her name is Robin. Super, super nice woman. Really love that her colors are just a little bit different because they have that softer look. Then for fiber, the final vendor I bought from is Fiber Optic Yarns. So there's Fiber Optic. And this one here is a blend of BFL and silk, and I love spinning BFL, so adding silk to it is really nice too. And, oops, the braid nicely coiled and it came out of the coil. So here is the colorway that I picked. So it's got some nice colors in there, and I think this is one I might try some of those techniques for spinning singles that I learned in my class, because I think this would be fun to play with these colors and do some different things with that. So maybe not. We'll see what happens when I actually go to spin that. And then Fiber Optic also had this really neat package, and this is totally going to blow out the light, of 27 different sheep breeds. So here is a list of the 27 breeds that are in here. So it is half an ounce of each of these fibers. So I'll show you the other side. So they're each in individual baggies and they're labeled. So half an ounce of each fiber, and there are things in here that I've heard of but never spun, such as Zwarspedals, or however you actually pronounce that one. Some of these I have spun a little bit more. Finn I did fairly recently. There's some BFL in here. But there is Swaledale and Teeswater and Icelandic and Perrendale. I mean, these are all things that I've heard of, but I've never gotten a chance to spin. So I think that will be a fun little exploration. Planning to spin each sample and then knit swatches, so I can also see how that fiber knits up. And maybe I'll make some type of like patchwork. It probably won't be a whole blanket, but maybe I'll actually like sew them together and create a wall hanging or something out of it. I think that might be fun. So that is the fiber and yarn that I got. And then I got some tools and things. So I have a couple of nitty knotties. If you are a spinner, then you probably know what that is. If you're not, it basically is usually it's made out of wood, and it looks like an eye, but you twist it so that the two cross beams are perpendicular to each other, and you use it to wind the yarn off of your bobbin and create a skein, basically. And my nitty knotties are a 2-yard nitty knotty and one that's like somewhere between a yard and a half. But when you're doing, for example, when I'm spinning those 27 different breeds, only half an ounce of fiber, you don't have a huge skein that you're going to want to make out of it. And so there are nitty knotties that are much smaller that are actually called sampling nitty knotties that are basically designed when you are doing little samples. And there are wooden ones that are available, but I decided to go with this one. So something just fell. Sorry about that sound. So this one, which I believe is 3D printed, it comes apart, so it's very easy to store, and then you put it together. I got this from the Wool and Cotton Company, and there were various colors that she had there, and you can mix and match your colors. I decided to go with the blue and gray. But I think this definitely comes in very handy. Like I said, super easy to take with you and to change into a little sampling nitty knotty. So happy to pick that up. I almost bought one of these last year and didn't, and so this year I knew I wanted to get one. So that was good. I also just got, one that fell on the floor. I got extra bobbins, one for my Joy. So I got this one from the Yarn Barn of Kansas. And then I got a breakdown bobbin from Hanson, so for my mini spinner. I had 3 bobbins for each one, but I decided to go ahead and get a 4th bobbin just to have that extra one just in case. So I got those 2 things. And then Goodies Unlimited, who, if you go to DFW Fiber Fest, you should be familiar with, was there, which I was really excited about because I didn't have as much time at DFW. And I knew that I wanted to get some wood beams. So there is wood beams. And this basically, I plan, people do use it for their spinning wheels if they have unfinished spinning wheels. But my wheels are finished, so I don't need it for that. But my warping mill is unfinished wood, and I can tell that it needs a little bit of TLC. It gets a lot of use. It's what I use for self-striping yarn. So it gets a lot of use, and I think it just needs a good rub down with this wood beams. And maybe some tightening here and there, just so it stays in good shape. It's one of my most important pieces of equipment, so I really need to take care of it. And so I'm glad that that Goodies Unlimited makes that. So again, wood beams. If you have any unfinished wood, whether it be a fiber equipment or something else, this is some good stuff to put on it. And then I also got a little jar of everything balm. Maybe over here, light. So everything balm. Basically, you put it on everything on your skin. If you have a cut or a bruise or some dry skin, this definitely helps. And when I was up in Kansas City, the weather was a little chillier than I was expecting. And when the weather is cold, the backs of my hands on my knuckles start to crack. And I only had one container of everything balm at home, and I left it at home because my son kind of licks his lips, and the skin gets really dry underneath his lips, and so I've been putting it on there. So I left it for him, and then I ended up needing some, and so really happy Goodies Unlimited was there, so I could grab the little travel size version and have that with me. So that was really good. And then my final purchase was actually my big purchase. This was the thing that I did to treat myself. So again, at DFW Fiberfest, Clemis and Clemis, who they do a lot of tools for spinners. They were at PLY Away, and at DFW Fiberfest I bought hand cards, which I showed you guys, and I was eyeing the Lazy Kates because I really liked the way they were designed, because they are designed so that the bobbin will sit at a 45-degree angle, so you don't have to tension the bobbin when you are using it for plying. The angle that the bobbin sits at kind of gives it the tension that it needs. And so I was looking at these, and I finally decided, you know what, I think this is going to be the thing that I treat myself on. And I went ahead and also picked, they have them in different types of wood. I picked a wood that I really love. And so here is my Lazy Kate. I will show you the little rods in just a second. So Clemis and Clemis. Super nice guys, by the way, the father and son team. Really enjoy talking to them. So this is a Lazy Kate design that was actually created for Judith McKenzie. So if you're a spinner, hopefully you know who Judith McKenzie is. Apparently Will Taylor originally did this design, and now Clemis and Clemis has the rights to use it and to sell it. And I was wondering, you know, when I'm looking at them on the shelf, I'm thinking, well, obviously you need to put the little rods inside to hold the bobbins. Where are they? Look how clever this is. So this end right here, you give it a little bit of a twist, da-da-da, and there's a little channel there that hold your 3 rods. And then you just put those in like that, and you put your bobbin on them, and ta-da! There's your Lazy Kate. And again, since it's sitting at an angle, so there you can see the angle, since it's sitting at the angle, it helps to keep your bobbins from spinning out of control. So really like that little clever storage compartment in there. The wood that I picked is, and I've never known how to pronounce it, because if I remember right, it's spelled like Paduak, and I wasn't sure, you know, is it Paduak? Apparently no, it's just Paduak. So the wood is Paduak. I really like this wood. I have a horizontal swift, a Hornshaw swift made out of Paduak, so it kind of will match that a bit. So really pretty. And that was my big treat that I gave to myself. The other little treat, non-fiber related, so the hotel is connected to this little shopping center, and in the shopping center there is a pen store. And I think they do a lot of business during the weekend that PLY Away is there, because Beth Smith especially is a big pen person, and she gets Jillian Moreno and Amy King, those are all spinning teachers, to buy pens, and they usually encourage other people to buy pens. And I think the pen store last year probably didn't know what hit them the weekend that PLY Away was there. So I did go into the pen store, and I came out with a pen. So this is a pen that has little cats on it. Super cute. I wanted to get a fountain pen, but this one was set up as a roller ball. There is a fountain pen conversion, But I went like on Saturday. I think it was Saturday morning that I went, so they had done a lot of business during the week, and they were out of the converter kits for the fountain pen converter kit, but I was able to find it online, so eventually I will order that and convert this pen into a fountain pen. But I think it's also nice to have the rollerball option, so that way I can do both, kind of depending on what I feel like writing with. So that is my stashing for what I did for PLY Away. And then I also had a side trip that I will talk about next. All right, so I'm up at PLY Away, and I believe this was Wednesday evening. Pretty sure it was Wednesday evening. I was just kind of winding down, getting ready to go to sleep, and I was checking Facebook. And one of the people I follow on Facebook is Felicia Day. If you're not familiar with Felicia Day, she is definitely well known kind of in the geek world. She did one of her first, and she's an actor, and she also has produced things. So one of her first acting jobs was actually a small role on Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, the very final season. She was one of the potential slayers. She's also been on shows such as Eureka and Supernatural, and I think a lot of people probably know her most from that role on Supernatural. She played a character named Charlie, who shows up in some of the later seasons. But what I know her most from, I mean, I know her from Buffy, but what and Supernatural. What I know her the most from is the web series that she created, and it's been a while since it came out, called The Guild, which is basically about a group of people who are playing something like World of Warcraft, so an online role-playing game. And they get together and meet each other in real life, and you know, each season they have different things that they do, and one of them they actually go to a gaming convention, and it's super humorous and a lot of fun, especially if you've played any of those online games or have gone to a convention. So The Guild is really, really great. She produced it, she wrote it, and then she was one of the starring roles in it. She also has or I guess at one time had a YouTube channel called Geek and Sundry, where she's, you know, basically shared a lot of her experiences with gaming and with other types of things. And she really is kind of one of those names that that if you're kind of in that gamer geek world, especially if you're a girl, you should know who Felicia Day is. So she's also one of the people on, you know, kind of towards the top of my list of people I would most like to meet someday. Anyway, so all that to say, on Wednesday, checking Facebook, and she posted on Facebook that she was going to be in Kansas City that weekend. What? I'm in Kansas City this weekend. What do you mean she's going to be in Kansas City? Yeah, apparently there was a Comic-Con in Kansas City the weekend of PLY Away. It was called Planet Comic-Con. I had no idea that it was going on. And we were in downtown Kansas City, and the convention center was also in downtown Kansas City. They recently, Kansas City put in a free shuttle that basically goes up Main Street, but it will get you from one part of downtown to the other. And the hotel that I was at was right across from one of the, actually the end point of the shuttle, where it's at Union Station. And so I just had to take the shuttle down 3 stops, walk 2 or 3 blocks, and I would get to the convention center. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am here in Kansas City. This is a really great opportunity. I can't miss it. So I decided that Saturday afternoon was when she had a photo op, and that I did not have a spinning class. And by Saturday afternoon, really everything is winding down. So I talked to JC and asked if I could sneak away on Saturday afternoon, and she said that was completely okay. So that's what I did. I bought my ticket on, I think, Thursday morning. So I got the photo op and then a ticket for Saturday for the Comic-Con. So Saturday afternoon, I did a photo op with Felicia Day. And yes, I'm wearing the same shirt that I wore in the photo op that we had with Mark Hamill. mostly because I didn't know that this was going on and I didn't pack appropriately, and that was kind of what I had. But I'm also wearing my Hitofude cardigan because it was chilly and rainy that day, and that I did not have a jacket. That was the closest thing I had. But anyway, so there is my photo op with Felicia Day. And she actually said she liked my shirt and that she took a picture there, meaning platform 9 3/4, when she was in London. But of course, at photo op time, they shuffle you in and out, so I didn't really get a chance to respond and tell her, yeah, I've done that too. But anyway, so I decided that I was there. It was a good opportunity. I wanted to wait in line to get her autograph, and I was originally planning on actually having her autograph the photo. So I got in line. And I thought maybe while I was there, maybe I would do a photo op or get an autograph from someone else. There were several Doctor Who people there. Billie Piper, Catherine Tate, John Barrowman, Will Wheaton was there. So that was kind of fun. I didn't get to talk to him, but I did get to see him. Summer Glau from Firefly, which again, I only got to see her from across the way. And then, several other people. So I thought, especially the Doctor Who people, they also had photo ops in the afternoon on Saturday. So I thought, well, maybe if I get through the line here for the autograph, then I will go get a photo op with them. Yeah, I waited in line for just over 2 hours for Felicia Day. Part of it was because I got in line right after the photo op, so she was still doing the photo op. And then part of it is, honestly, she's just a super nice person, and she wanted to chat with everyone. So each person, got a couple of minutes with her. And, if you've got quite a few people ahead of you, those couple of minutes add up. And anytime someone who had a fast pass, which is you basically pay a much more expensive admission, you get to basically go to the front of the line. So anytime someone with a fast pass came in, they would go to the front of the line, meaning that everyone who'd been waiting for a long time had to wait even longer. So I waited and waited and waited. The interesting thing is that I have a friend from someone that I met in an online community called Book Crossing. Years and years ago, and we're still friends on Facebook, and she posted, and I know that she lived in the Kansas City area, but she posted that she was at Comic-Con, and we actually were both in Felicia Day's line. I was a little ahead of her, so we actually got to talk for a little bit while we were waiting in line. Unfortunately, we didn't find each other in the line until we'd been there for quite a while, so we didn't get to talk for the whole 2 hours, but we got to chat for a little bit, so it was fun. I got to see an old friend. Anyway, so I finally got to the front of the line, and I noticed that they had copies of her book, which is an autobiography. And I thought, you know what, as cool as it would be to have the photo signed, I actually personally value books being signed more than things like photographs. And so I thought, I listened to her book. I listened to it on audiobook. She actually did the voicing, so I really love listening to autobiographies that are voiced by the person who wrote it. So I did not have a physical copy. So I went ahead and bought a physical copy of her book. So it is called You're Never Weird on the Internet, almost. Which, by the way, if you are at all interested in this type of thing, you really need to read this book. She is so unflinchingly honest about her life and kind of how she came to the point where she was at the end of this book. So really, really enjoyed this book. Apparently there's a bonus chapter, which I'm going to have to read because I don't think that was in the audiobook. But I decided to go ahead and get this autographed instead of the photo. So you can't really tell her name, but hey, she wrote my name, a little heart, and then there's her autograph. But so I really, really love the book, and now I'm glad I have a physical copy and it's signed. And so when I got up to her, I was like, what am I going to say? What am I going to talk about? Do I refer back to that photo op moment where she said she liked my shirt and kind of try to continue that conversation about platform 9 3/4? What do I want to say? So I basically told her, thank you so much for posting about this event on Facebook. I am actually here from out of town for a completely different reason and had no idea this was going on. So because you posted about it, that's why I got to come. And then she asked me if I'd read the book, and I said, well, I've listened to it, the audiobook, so I didn't have a hard copy and thought I would buy it. And she said something like, well, now you have a copy to loan out. And I kind of laughed and was like, I'm not loaning out this copy. I said, I need to get another copy to loan out. And she said something like, oh yeah, just, screw everyone else. But I mean, really, would you loan out the autographed copy? I don't think so. But anyway, so that was my little interaction with her. Like I said, she was super nice. She really took the time to talk to everybody. And I really enjoyed getting to meet her, and I had no idea going out to Kansas City that I was going to do that. So that was really exciting, and lots of fun. But since I waited in her line for so long, I did not have a chance to do any photos or autographs with anyone else. Which is fine. It was the end of the week. I was really, really tired. I went back to the hotel room, checked with JC to see if she needed any help for anything else. I got to eat some pizza with some of the teachers, just to kind of relax. And then Sunday morning, I got in my car and drove back to Texas. It's about an 8-hour drive. But kind of glad I drove because I ended up bringing back, a lot more than I went with. So I didn't have to worry about trying to fit everything in a suitcase and on the plane. And it was a really great experience. Now I'm back trying to get back into my routine and get back into all the dyeing and working on the book. Which you notice that I did not have a what I'm dyeing or designing section in here, mostly because I just need to sit back down and figure out what I'm doing and get back into it. So more on that in the next episode. But I think that really should do it for my PLY Away trip. Thank you so very much for watching this episode of the podcast and listening to me go on and on about PLY Away. If you are a spinner, definitely, if you have not subscribed to PLY Magazine, you should do so. It is a fantastic quarterly magazine. And then hopefully next year, maybe you can try going to PLY Away, and I will get to see you, and we can sit down and chat, have something to eat, share our spinning and our love of fiber. If you're not a spinner, keep it in mind. If you ever decide to become a spinner, it's definitely a great resource. Anyway, so thank you so very much for watching. I will be back in 2 weeks with another episode, kind of going back to the usual kind of segments and updating on what I'm reading as well, reading and watching types of things. So if you are a new viewer, thank you for checking out this episode of the podcast. I hope you will come back. And for returning viewers, thank you very much for sharing this time with me every other week. And if you are so inclined and you enjoyed this episode, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the thumbs up underneath the video to show that you liked it. It helps other people find it. And if you have not yet, hit subscribe. Hit the subscribe button either on YouTube or iTunes, so that way you're notified whenever new episodes get posted, usually on an every other week schedule, so every other Thursday. But occasionally I record an episode early or an episode kind of in the interim. So again, thank you so very much for watching. Go to the Ravelry group if you want to discuss this episode. I will link to everything in the show notes, which you can find on tshirtsandshawls.com and then /episode 27. So I will see you guys again in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching and happy knitting.